Good evening, everybody. I think this is the first time I'm hosting a session in the evening. I'm used to my Saturday mornings, Mr. Rankin.
And not the last.
Okay. So good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Evaluate Mogul Masterclass. This is our second one. So we're very, very excited, and we are joined. Our guest today is Dumisa Rankin, and he will be chatting about digital content creation. So, I had to do my research, obviously, on our guest, pretend I don't know him because he is a guest of honor tonight. So, Dumisa is the co-founder of JD Creations. So he is an entrepreneur. So for those of you guys there who are entrepreneurs, please be ready with your questions. And correct me if I'm right, if I'm wrong, Dumisa, but JD Creations is a digital content creation agency, correct?
Yes, yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. So today, like I said, that's what Dumisa will be talking to us about, and I will give him the platform to, introduce himself, tell us about what their company does, what their focus does, and then also school us on digital creation, digital content creation. But before, we start, I liked what you said on your LinkedIn profile, that content has the power to touch hearts and minds. And with the right combinations, content can leave a mark on the world, because this is what we always talk about when in our social media and personal branding program. We talk about creating creating content out of what you know, your skills, your passions, and that really has the power, like you said, to touch hearts and minds as well. And you go on to say, I believe in creating content that bonds a brand with their current and potential audience. Too often, brands are focused on pushing their content for the sake of imagery or branding. We've seen that too many times, when their focus should be on the value their content can provide to their audience. I think that's really powerful. That is really, really powerful. And I'm excited to hear what you have to say this evening and schoolers on, the power of content creation, especially in the age of digital and social media and so on. So welcome, Dumisa. Everybody, please let's give a round of applause for Dumisa Rankin.
I hope I can give some schooling. I know that you're like a content queen already, so you probably know most of this stuff by now.
Oh my gosh.
No, thank you for having me on, and hello to everyone. Good evening. I hope that you learned something today, and I hope that you learned a little bit about me. Maybe I can learn a little bit about you as we go along. But yeah, we can just dive straight into it. Do I just need a screen share? Let's see. Awesome. Can you all see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Sweet. Is it just the slide? I'm assuming. Okay, cool. So yeah, digital content creation. So basically, I'll start out with a little bit of a explanation on who I am and kind of how I got involved into like content creation to begin with. But I was in high school until 2015, which is when I matriculated. During high school, I was shooting a couple sort of like entertainment videos or educational videos. It was kind of focused, I was in art class, so it was kind of focused around each week we'd create a piece of content around like a different artist, like Leonardo da Vinci, or like anyone really. I can't remember any of those high school artists, but it was about like 4 that we'd do a term, so we had quite a decent amount of time to do them. And that way I also didn't have to show my really crappy content to people that often. But then after graduating, I sort of had like this kind of taste for like creating content and making YouTube videos with my friends and that stuff during school. And then went to film school to sort of dive into it a little bit deeper, because I wanted to sort of understand, well, at first I thought I wanted to just do filmmaking. And so I wanted to just go into the film industry, and I thought a film school would be one of the best ways to kind of do that. So I started out, and in first year, I kind of had to do like a bit of everything. But because I was already playing with the cameras during school and stuff, I knew that cinematography or directing were like the 2 things that I wanted to do. And I ended up deciding on cinematography because it's a little bit more technical than like directing and writing. So there's like formulas that you kind of have to follow for like directing or writing. But when it comes to cinematography, you're working with a piece of tech at the end of the day. So you kind of have to understand lenses, cameras, sensors, and like all the details and additions that get sort of put together with that. So I felt because it's more technical, it might be a little bit more educational and more beneficial to me in sort of long run. And so around second year, once I started majoring in cinematography, I started freelancing at the same time. I kind of tried it in first year, but nothing really happened. But then second year, once my sort of quality and standard of work had improved, I started freelancing with a good friend of mine, Joshua Souza, who I know from high school. And we started making like money here and there doing photography. He'd do photography and I'd do the videography of like events, like parties or matric dances or some sort of like interviews every now and then. But we didn't get the opportunity to do anything that creative. It was more just like capturing stuff with the camera at first. And then come the beginning of 2019, when I was finished with after studies, I co-founded a company with Josh called JD Creations. And JD Creations, as we've always said, is a company that focuses on digital content creation that ultimately helps drive revenue to a business and helps increase their bottom end at the end of the day, because that's what all businesses want. So because this is about the future of content, I figured let's first define what content is. So content is information and experiences that is directed toward an end user or an audience. And it is something that is that is expressed through a medium such as speech, writing, or any other various arts. My mode of expression is video production, and occasionally I dabble in photography and music. But your mode of expression doesn't necessarily have to be an art. I mean, you could, for example, be someone who likes wearing fashion, or just any way of expressing yourself in general can have content created around it. So it doesn't need to necessarily be something that you care about that creates content, but you can have content created around whatever it is that you love at any point. And an example of this is, for example, screwdrivers. Like screwdrivers isn't a very entertaining thing, but if you look at the show, how it's made, you start getting exposed to the whole behind the scenes of how screwdrivers are made, what sort of information needs to get incorporated into it, what kind of computing needs to get determined, and like the design of a screwdriver. And getting exposed to that can actually be quite entertaining, even though it's not the most entertaining subject matter to begin with, but then it gets made entertaining. And it's also educational in that sense, which is also what sort of keeps us watching it. But what's important is that at the end of the day, with whatever content you're creating, value is being added. And this is what Rafiel was mentioning in my sort of LinkedIn bio. Because currently content is being provided at a minimum value because it's not being used to provide value. It's sort of just being used to tick a digital checkbox. So a lot of corporations at the moment just think, okay, because we're posting, as long as we're just merely posting on our Instagram or our Twitter or our social medias, then that's good enough. Whereas in reality, you need to be creating content that's actually really engaging for your audience and builds it behind your brand. Because any business that's trying to sort of focus on online business driven to it has to have a really good brand behind it. And so ways of adding value, there's three main ways, and you get sort of extensions onto this, but if you look them up, go look them up yourselves as well, you'll see that they basically fall into these main three principles. And so any piece of content that you want to create needs to have one of the three principles, which is education, entertainment, or inspiration. So it's educational because it's teaching you something. At the end of the day, I love watching different lectures or different sort of philosophers or psychologists or educational individuals speaking on podcast formats or in videos or in various types of content or mediums to educate me on different topics that I might not know about or ones that I already do. Entertainment is something that we all love. We all love just watching Netflix or YouTube or animations or anything just to sort of just sit there and enjoy something and have an experience and immerse in a story. And then inspiration. Sometimes we like to watch like Gary V's, if you know him, or various sort of inspirational individuals that will create content around trying to drive you to bettering yourself. And these are the three principles that sort of really engage users the most when it comes to social media or any sort of content creation, because it's providing them value. And generally, brands try to focus more on their brand and what message they're trying to push. So for example, they might be trying to push the fact that they have the biggest whiteboards. And they can keep trying to push that fact, but at the end of the day, if they don't have some sort of element backing it as to why it's beneficial to the user, what value it adds, then it's not going to really be beneficial. So if you create value for those whiteboards around how an artist can start or business team can start sketching out way more projects within their office space, and you create a piece of content around them actually achieving that and then how that can benefit them, that might help sell those large whiteboards, for example. It's not a great example because whiteboards is also difficult to sell, but I do believe that you can create content around anything as long as you just sort of dive deep enough into the why it's there, just pull out the story behind it, you know?
Yeah.
And so,
I have a quick question before we move on, Dumisa. So, I mean, if we go back to your previous slide, right? Sorry, I'm just gonna, I don't want you to wait till the whole presentation and then ask you questions at the end. And those on the call, please feel free to just put your questions or comments on the chat box as well. So you spoke about, the value that the content adds to the brand. So for you so you are an agency. So a company, a brand would hire you to come and create content for them, right? Now, when you talk about, content that adds value, content that's, either educational, and, you speak about it should add value, go to education, entertainment, or inspiration. Whose responsibility is it? Is it yours, or is it the brand, the company, to almost give the direction of where it should be? And in here, I'm referencing the saga that we just had with Clicks, right? Because they were saying, well, it was the agency that made that mistake and they put that content up. But it's like, but it's your brand. It's at the end of the, it's your brand. So for you as an agency, when a company hires you or they outsource you for your resources, basically for your work, whose job is it to make sure that messaging or the value that you're trying to put the content is in alignment with the actual brand, that it adds value?
That's a very good question. And like the Clicks example is actually a very good example. From my own personal experience and from my own beliefs, I believe that it's a collaboration. So at the end of the day, the responsibility will fall on us because we're providing the service. So technically we have to maximize that output and ensure that we're getting them the best job done. But I do believe it needs to be a collaboration. So if Clicks, for example, wasn't fully involved in the process of developing that content and that whole marketing campaign, then they are at fault for not actually being involved in it to begin with. Because I do feel like in order to like achieve the best sort of content possible, then you do need to collaborate with the people whose story you're telling. And you do need to sort of come to some common middle ground to establish, okay, this is exactly what our goal is with this, and you're happy with it, and I'm happy with it. And then we're both ready to go ahead. Because otherwise you end up resulting in like the Clicks incidents or scenarios where the client isn't happy because they didn't get their expectations met because there's maybe this level of communication that hasn't been incorporated. And so, yeah, I think collaborating amongst it is probably the best way to achieve that.
No, great, thanks.
No, thank you for the content. I mean, the question. Thank you. And so something I want to dive into now, which has to do with like the future of content creation, is virtual production. I want to see if this will play. I have a video. Okay, let me just share something else here. Awesome. Okay, can you all see my screen still?
Yes.
It's YouTube now.
Yep, we can.
Part of what's been fun about collaborating on The Mandalorian with Lucasfilm and Disney is that we have been able to see through a few technical innovations and a few firsts that I think are going to have a lot of impact on the way television and movies are made moving forward. In partnership with ILM and Epic, we have put together a system whereby which we can have game engine, real-time render, and video wall technology coming together to create a backdrop for the big, beautiful world of Star Wars.
The volume is 21 feet tall. It's 75 feet in diameter, run by 7 machines, pumping the visuals onto the screen that's been created in pre-production and can be on the screen within 24 hours of being final.
It's incredibly impressive when you first walk out there because it completely surrounds your peripheral vision. And you really quickly forget that you're indoors and you're not out on some planet's surface. It feels like a real three-dimensional environment surrounding you because it is a three-dimensional environment.
You can allow your key creatives to all make decisions together so that the shots are captured entirely in camera, which allows for a better performance.
And what was so exciting about this is by bringing those people together, things started to click. And we started to realize, well, let's not just do green screen and interactive light. If we're going to design the whole set and game engine ahead of time, maybe we could have some in-camera effects.
Everything in the volume is designed to both light the actors and to be a background that we can directly photograph. So you end up with real-time final pixels in camera.
If you look at visual effects heavy films, you've got a film set and then it's going to go to post and it's going to get the world put in. Here we're considering all of that at the same time. And how do we create a background and foreground that live together on the volume harmoniously?
When we started to play with the idea of using Unreal Engine for virtual production, that's one of the things that Richard and John started to embrace, is that you've got this very dynamic world where you can have randomization of things and find the happy accident that gives you the perfect shot. Being able to see the actors point at things and see what they're looking at was pretty transformative. It gave everybody context, with the added benefit that if you want to move a mountain from there to there, you can do it instantly.
You could switch between the Iceland location to the desert location, all within the same day of shooting.
The ability to shoot a 10-hour dawn is extraordinary. To shoot any sequence where you say, oh, this world's not quite right, let's just move it a little bit. An extraordinary number of benefits and advantages for shooting in that environment. It's mind-blowing what that tool is.
What you see is really what you get. And that's something that really means a lot to filmmakers, especially those who have worked with a more traditional approach in the past.
Shots of character in a vehicle traveling through a complex environment. It's always very difficult to do believably on stage. LED screens are a wonderful solution to that problem, because what you're doing is you're taking this technique of image-based lighting that we've been using in computer graphics for years, and you use it to light a subject.
And then we would do shoots where we would texture map real lit surfaces onto our game engine Geo. And so the camera could move anywhere. We would do interiors, like Werner Herzog's office. And then you started doing things like building sets into it, having half a spaceship with reflective surfaces. And so it became exciting, because by the end of the season, it was like, let's start designing sets around what this could do well.
Just like the good old days.
With Star Wars, we're building on a rich legacy of innovation, and getting to partner with Jon Favreau to make his ambitious vision a reality, it's really a game changer for filmmaking.
Yeah, so what you just saw there is a
I'm going to want my money back if I go to movies and see this.
No, all the movies you've been seeing recently are literally like this.
Oh man, what happened to finding a set and building a set from scratch, and it takes a year?
No, now we can get the Jungle Book, we can get the new Lion King, because those
that costs a lot of money. What you like to watch on screen, which is like one of the sort of innovations that really does provide, is that you can do all those amazing things, but at a slightly cheaper price in comparison to like having to actually go to the Amazon jungle to shoot the Jungle Book.
Yeah.
Continue.
That's good.
You're not sold on it.
I want to go to the Amazon jungle.
Okay. I mean, there's definitely still a place for that, and there'll always be a place for it. I think it's very important to make sure that the stuff that you do in that virtual world is inspired by real life sort of elements, and then where you can, you incorporate real life elements as well to sort of really bring it like just a really blended and unique look. And like the virtual production as a whole provides like a lot of opportunities. So the first one that I was touching on was it can drastically decrease the price of production. There's no need to travel. You can make anywhere, wherever you want. I can start shooting in the Amazon jungle from my own green screen downstairs, and you need minimal crew, and there's also minimal post-production. So overall, you're saving time and you're saving money, because money is time at the end of the day. And then what this also allows you to do is it expands your creative freedom. And also there's minimal competition doing this at the moment, because it's a very developing sort of element within the industry. And so I had two more examples here, but unfortunately this player doesn't seem like it's going to play the videos. One of them, if you search them on YouTube, you'll find like a couple videos of like virtual production being done. And then I'll find a way to maybe send this through to everybody where they can view a link and see our sort of first attempt that we did a month and a half ago with the setup that we purchased. At the moment, we don't do it with an LED screen like they do it there, because that's very bougie and very big budget stuff. But we found a way to sort of reduce the cost and the entry level to start trying to achieve a very similar sort of output. And so some of the threats that we've sort of found trying to achieve this sort of future element of content creation is that at the moment there's minimal support available around the world. There's only one piece of software. We're using the same one that they used on that Star Wars video to actually start creating these things. And that piece of software, as you saw, only started really doing this about like a year ago at most, maybe. And so there's very little support for it at the moment. It's not very well developed unless you have Star Wars kind of budget to have like the actual developers on set with you, which unfortunately we can't because we live a little bit far away. But we've managed to sort of like push through these difficulties because we do know that it's achievable just by simply watching that video. We know, okay, you can do it. So it's just a matter of figuring out how we do it, navigating around bugs and like working out those kinks. And so that's a threat, but at the end of the day, we're still managing to get through it. There's generally a large setup cost, as you could imagine with anything in the film industry. I know I say we managed to reduce that cost down, but it was still a substantial cost. And so that's still something to consider when entering these type of things, is that it is an investment, particularly if you're trying to sort of approach it from a young individual's point of view where you don't have much money available to you to start investing in LED screens or large green screen studios or anything like that. And so that kind of leads on to the third one, which is that it might not work. Because at the end of the day, one of the threats is that there are sort of larger production companies in the country, of which we haven't seen any approach this yet. But within the next 3 years, which is when it's expected to start becoming mainstream, is when you could expect larger companies to just pour money into this type of thing. And so the reason it might not work is because then once they start just taking that market share and just like taking over, you know, the providing of that service and then providing it to their already attained large clients, then it can really push us out the market. But I do still think there's a gap for it in a sort of SME medium level, which is where we're approaching it now, and then hoping that one day we can sort of build it past that to a larger sort of corporation level. So then this brings me on to the second half of like my life, which is entrepreneurship. And so I became an entrepreneur for like two particular reasons. One of them was to have creative freedom, and then the other one was to have control over my day-to-day life, which may sound a little bit dramatic because it's not entirely like corporation controls your life, but I just didn't feel like that was the type of environment where I'd thrive, which is the primary reason I didn't want to be an employee in a corporation. And then the reason I didn't want to follow the traditional Hollywood system is because it's still a matter of your progress being determined by people of whom are above you within the sort of hierarchy that you provided. And so I didn't really feel like I attained or fit to any of those hierarchies. And so I chose to kind of go a different route. And some of the lessons that I've learned at the top, I've learned a list, like I could go on and on about the lessons I've learned doing entrepreneurship, and I'm only a year and like a half in. But some, I'd say the top three that I've learned, which I think I've said before, are communication. It's very important to know how to communicate with people, how to ensure that you're solving a problem rather than focusing on emotional interaction that may be taking place. Because at the end of the day, what you're trying to do with every sort of communication or any sort of conflict, especially, is you're trying to progress rather than focus on how you're feeling. And so then the next sort of lesson that I've learned is organization and planning, and being able to manage my own time as well as other people's time now. And then another lesson that it's given me is actually an increase in confidence, thanks to learning how to sell. There was a time where we'd sort of we went to Brightwater Commons, like a mall that's nearby, and just try to go to every single shop that we could and basically try to speak to the manager and like sell them our old sort of service that we were trying to provide, which was just like videography and photography at the time. And so doing that, because I had to go and just basically like face failure of people not giving a single crap about what I'm trying to sell them or what I'm trying to do, it sort of increased my confidence because I don't really think too much about situations that may be nerve-wracking. I just sort of focus on, okay, I need to do it, so let me just focus on getting it done. And then also networking has opened this up for me, from having to like meet people at events and just getting interested in different people or them coming up to me and then just speaking to them just really helped sort of grow me as a person. And then also some of the challenges that I've run into as an entrepreneur is, number one, being inexperienced because I don't know what I don't know. And I do have awesome mentors around me, such as my dad, to provide me with information that's like really aged and experienced. But then unfortunately, it feels like on occasions, some experience you really only get from going through yourself. And sometimes it's awesome because, you know, we get given this information from our mentor and we sort of try to apply it, but we don't understand how to yet because we haven't really gone through the experience of where to identify that information or that situation. Then we go through the experience and we kind of make the mistake, but then we realize, oh, okay, that's what the sort of wisdom or information meant. And then that click sort of helps us sort of take the next steps. So that was a really interesting sort of like way of realizing that you learn, or that I learn anyways. And then another challenge that we've experienced a lot in entrepreneurship, I think a lot of it has to do with because we're young, but I think a lot of it also has to do with just there's jerks in the world, is that people have tried to take advantage of us. So they've seen that we're young, they see that we provide the service at a low cost at the moment, and they also see that we are quite inexperienced, and so we're not fully able to identify all of the situations that we should be avoiding. And so some people have really tried to swindle us out of like just time and energy and money and resources, and for their own benefit and not for really a mutual one, which they're very prepared to lie to our faces about. And so one of the largest challenges for us has been identifying what type of clients do we want to work with and what type of people do we want to work with. And that feels like one of those things that you only learn as well by just experiencing it and seeing it for yourself. And then one of the challenges, I guess you could say, it's really just like growth lessons. So things that you don't really expect to come across to you that you end up having to learn just by nature of being in that space. And that's things such as people management. Once we got employees, we had to learn, okay, like how do we manage their time and all these different questions that we didn't know we had, like contracts and all that sort of stuff. And then like client relations, financial planning, and like the list is infinite. It'll probably go on forever and ever and ever, just learning things. So a challenge is also just to continuously learn. And so coming towards the end here, my advice, if you want to be an entrepreneur, is that you have to be prepared to experience the most difficult things you've ever tried. And your why will get you through this, which is something that I know gets mentioned quite frequently on value education, is that you have to understand why exactly you're doing what you're doing. Yeah, my 2 reasons that I mentioned earlier for trying to do entrepreneurship is what gets me through the difficult times rather. And then also my overall goal is what helps me get through those sort of difficult times. So you really have to understand why you want to be an entrepreneur before you try to be an entrepreneur. And then the next step would be the obvious sort of identify a gap. We all hear this. And what I interpret by this is that basically you have to understand your value proposition and how it's different to potential competitors. So you have to be able to identify something that people aren't really offering. Because if they're already offering it, then what are you doing different for clients or potential customers to come to you specifically? And then something that I'd advise to everybody is to learn something new every day. Look them up and follow the different entrepreneurs and different like wealth and finance sort of individuals. Try to identify the ones who are the most legitimate, because that can be quite disorientating when you get people who aren't quite factual. But if you just look up like Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg or Steve Jobs type people, Bill Gates, those type of leads, and you just learn advice from them every day. Watch like an hour-long, 30-minute long sort of session that they've had at some university where they gave a talk, and you'll probably learn quite a lot about entrepreneurship and about different things from that. And then I'd advise the next step is look at the sort of entrepreneur space that you're in, and then follow people that pertain to that specifically. And then my last piece of advice, if you're going to go down the entrepreneurial route, is don't let your entrepreneurial mind overwhelm you, because it's a 24/7 job. And so taking breaks and looking after your health is really important, because other things in your life will sacrifice, like communication, relationships with friends or family or anyone else around you, and various other elements that you may not really be aware of until maybe too late. So something that I've had to learn is how to, not like let it fully overwhelm me, and learn how to sort of separate times and take some time for myself, which is very important. And then my advice for if you want to become a content creator is, first of all, to practice, because your first goal should be to provide whatever content you're creating at the industry standard. And so to do that, you can look at any sort of photographers, videographers, artists of any sort that you particularly like, that are in your particular sort of medium, and then see, okay, what point were they when they like started? What point were they at when they started providing it as a service? And then what point were they at when they were like successful? And then sort of compare the 3 different stages, and then aim for the one where you had to reach that standard to provide it as a service and start sort of earning an income from it. And then focus first to just achieving that level of quality. And then second piece of advice is to keep it simple. At the moment, we're a team of about 4 people, but it's still a very small team in comparison to other scale productions. And so us trying to achieve The Mandalorian, for example, is just completely unrealistic. But if we just keep it simpler and use what we have and our skills to achieve something slightly smaller, but at the best quality possible, then that will achieve the best goal, rather than trying to overextend for something that's almost unattainable. And then advice for being a creator is to network. because teamwork makes the dream work. And like I said, there's 4 of us in this team, and each of us provides something different. And so us providing something different and having different trains of thought really guides us and in a sort of unique way, I guess, as any project would, because people start adding their own ideas, their own input, their own sort of perspective to it. And then it starts becoming more and more unique and progressing. And so my last piece of advice, if you want to be a content creator, is to also just put your work in public. It's going to be on social media, if you're going to be entering into competitions, magazines, even if you try to get it in the newspaper or something, even if you just start an email chain and like send it to everyone you know. At least you're putting it out there and you're making people aware that, okay, this person does this stuff. They create this type of content. And then as you start sort of pertaining towards your level of standard and your quality becoming of the sort of standard where you can make an income from it, then that can start sort of playing in, and that can start sort of helping you out and benefiting you, and you can start earning work and slowly building yourself up as a freelancer. But yeah, that's the end of my slide show.
Wow, thank you, Dumisa. That was very great and very informative. I think, you know,
my boy.
We shocked Mr. Rankin. Don't be there with the visual effects. Black Panther was made in Atlanta.
No, it wasn't. It was made in Wakanda. What you talking about?
There is no that was really great.
Wakanda forever.
So we have a few questions on the side, and I think, you know, the one that's very interesting, and I want you to touch on that first, because I think quite a few people you know, confuse this. But Matsidiso asked, you know, what is the difference between digital content creation and marketing? So I want you to answer that, because obviously I know the answer.
I know the answer.
Well, yeah, I don't know if my answer is your answer, but my answer would basically be that marketing is a little bit more broader of a sort of medium or industry or space than digital content. So digital content is anything that you see online, sort of picture like billboards, where you have either photos or you have videos or you have music or you have podcasts or you have some sort of consumable mode of content, even if it's a blog or a journal. Then what marketing is, particularly, marketing is focused on actually selling a brand or a business. And so marketing is a little bit broad, but it utilizes digital content creation to market a business or a company. I hope that makes sense. I don't know if that answers.
No, that is spot on. Absolutely. So, I mean, as a brand, so if you worked, you know, okay, for example, my business, you know, I would outsource to meet JD Creations to do a video or to do, you know, some sort of what their value proposition is in order for me to sell my business, because I don't necessarily know how to shoot videos at angles that will best showcase what my brand is about, or, you know, all of that creative part element behind the scenes. So that is the difference. It's, I think, you know, to sum it up, to say, digital content creation is a tool that marketing uses in order to sell a business.
Yeah.
Mr. Vic, do you wanna add on to that?
You guys have hit the academics on this. It's hectic. Let me make it simpler. Digital is just a medium. So, you know, anything, you know, cell phones, laptops, smart TVs, whatever it is. It's just a medium, and the content that goes on there has to be thought of through a marketing construct. So digital content is, or digital marketing content is just marketing on a particular medium. And yeah, you're both right. You're absolutely right. And Dumisa, you're right. Marketing can go pretty broad because it's all sorts of things. It's to your point, you know, it's above the line, which is everything that you see in adverts and TV or movies. It's, you know, below the line where it's magazines and billboards and whatever you see there. But digital tends to form within the medium of a digital platform.
Thank you for that. Mahlati asked, you know, how important is artificial intelligence in the digital space?
It's interesting. So I'm yet to dabble with sort of artificial intelligence or machine learning or anything like that at the moment. I do think there would be a space for it in future when it comes to sort of determining, using statistics mainly. So like the stats for any sort of piece of content that we post or that any of our clients would post, it'd be very interesting, at least from my point of view, to record the data and engagement and then relate that engagement particularly to what type of content that is. So like I was saying, educational, entertainment or inspirational, and start gauging sort of what levels do you need to start applying to your content in order to achieve the most successful entertainment content, educational content or inspirational content, and sort of like trying to incorporate, I think, narrative elements into the sort of machine learning to determine, okay, your narrative now will most likely succeed based on these variables that you've input. I think that's something that Netflix is trying to do with its algorithm at the moment, but I haven't had much experience with that. But something that is sort of in a similar space, I guess, kind of, is like virtual reality. So all that stuff that you saw in that video relates to virtual reality, augmented reality, and that particular stuff is called mixed reality. And so it's very interesting at the moment, sort of witnessing the developments that are being made in augmented reality at the moment with like glasses that Facebook or any of these companies are doing, as well as the same progression in sort of mixed reality as well as virtual reality, which sort of those two go hand in hand quite well. But yeah, at the moment, I'm not quite so sure on artificial intelligence.
Talk a little bit about the green screen that you've created.
Yeah, so the green screen is basically like a cheaper way of achieving that goal. So at the moment, what we use is we use the HTC Vive, which is a virtual reality kit, to track the camera in 3D space in our real world. And we track that motion on a computer. And then what we have is we have a person stand in front of a green screen and we shoot that person, having our tracking device attached to our real life camera so that our virtual world and our real world is synced. And now you have mixed reality. And then we shoot those and we composite them together in something like After Effects, which is basically something where you just take out the green screen and put the person in. And then now you have sync and camera movement, and that allows you to do quite a lot more realistic sort of green screen work in comparison to old green screen work, where it's sort of a static person with a static background and there's not much dynamic motion going on.
Wow. Do you find that, with with COVID, it sort of changed things. People were not outside as much. So I could literally, like now with the green screen that you're talking about, if I wanted to have a video with outdoors in Santon Skyline, I don't have to be outside in the Santon Skyline. I can just come to your studio now and do that, So are you, I don't know how to phrase this, but are you finding that you're getting more clients, or you're becoming more popular because now of COVID has changed things? People can't be outside as much now. So your value proposition, is it getting more to people? Are people interacting with that more?
Yeah, definitely. Like what we saw in COVID was quite interesting because there was a slight cut in lots of our clients' budgets at the time. But then what we did notice is that there was a large appreciation for content that got developed. And so with the development of that appreciation, as COVID started dying down and as people started engaging and getting into business a little bit more, we found that there were a substantial amount more people that were interested in content, and then people who previously were interested in content were slightly more interested in it now that they'd sort of had more intimate experiences with it. When it comes to like the virtual production stuff, we're still in development with that, so we haven't started providing it yet as a like service to anybody. So we wanted to obviously become like high standard before we do that. But yeah, it's definitely going to be adding to our value prop. It already has technically like benefited us. It's given us the opportunity to network with people within the AR and VR like sort of industries, and that's sort of opened us up to collaborating with people who are in India and in different parts of Europe, which is quite cool. And so that's also the potential that has come out of like a few LinkedIn posts about this stuff already, which is cool. So yeah, I think overall our value proposition, it has added to it. Our overall value proposition is to provide a high standard of content production at a low cost. And so that's our overall goal. And as long as we can keep trying to achieve the best sort of standard of content and in all these new developing sort of spaces at a low cost, then that's sort of the service that we're ultimately aiming to provide. And that's why we're hopping onto this overall virtual production thing very early, trying to figure out how do we provide it at a low cost.
Awesome. Now that's great. Matshidiso asked, you think TV is going to survive our digital age?
That's a good question. There's a lot of interesting things that happen. Recently, we were kind of wondering the same thing until DSTV ended up signing a deal with all the streaming platforms like Netflix and Curiosity. Yeah, and so the fact that they did that sort of maybe keeps them alive in future because people are now going to potentially be going through DSTV to get through into Netflix. They're also trying to do things like regulate overall content on the internet so that then they can end up staying within the market by nature of just like political lobbying. But I'm not so sure if it's totally going to die off. I don't think it will. I think it may be, well, at the very least, we'll kind of remember it like radio to an extent. There'll be a place and a time for it where people sort of use it. I think people will definitely still use television sets, but I think everything's going to sort of more or less go towards streaming. I think including DSTV, they'll probably end up just using DSTV now.
Yeah, absolutely. Do we have any more comments, questions?
I have a question.
I'm interested to hear from Beyonce.
Oh, Tobe, long time.
Yeah, long time. My question is, so my first question is, let's say I'm a coffee brand. Okay, so should the content that I'm creating, should it match like the brand? Let's say, does it matter if I do an education, like the content is educational or entertainment wise or inspirational?
Yeah, I definitely think it does. I mean, I'd be interested to know how you make your coffee or what the ingredients particularly behind your coffee is. And then there's other elements that you could throw in there in terms of entertainment. I mean, you could try sort of with that, coffee that you make. I mean, I know they pour like the milk and they start making designs. That could also be quite entertaining. So it can definitely pertain to like your coffee brand as well. It just depends on sort of how you get creative with it and what you try to achieve. A lot of the time, what we try to achieve with like our content, we sort of align it towards what difficulties or problems clients might face. So for example, with the coffee company, it may be like, oh, people don't really buy our coffee because they don't know what exactly is inside it or what's the difference between like Rick coffee and our coffee. And so then making content around answering that question helps you and helps provide your audience with that value.
Absolutely.
And also, you were talking about like the augmented reality and the mixed reality space. So I wanted to ask, like, when do you think that like phase or that market's gonna like arrive in SA or Africa as a whole?
Question. I'm pretty sure it'll be really soon. Like I see a lot of those experts sort of believe that within the next 5 years in Hollywood, it's going to become like a mainstream thing. I think within the next 3 to 5 years, you'll probably see it kind of popping up a lot more in your regular sort of feeds on the internet. But yeah, I think it's still developing. So maybe I'd say 3 to 5 years, but yeah, it could be longer than that.
Okay.
Awesome. Anybody else? Oh, Beyonce's gone. Hi, Lazola. Great. Well, I'm not, anybody else in the questions? Vic, did you learn something?
Yeah, hey, yeah, I learned. I'm learning. Hopefully it'll be retained tomorrow. Might be in square one. But the question on the TV was an interesting one. And Dumisa's right. I mean, there's always a time and place for everything. I remember back in the day when people said records were gone and records have made a major comeback. So it's gonna be interesting in the sense that yes, streaming is definitely one of it. I think there's going to be a challenge for cinemas. I think content like pay as you go is going to become big. It's already big in the States, but I don't think we've created the bandwidth and the technology to be able to do it here, either through cabling or streaming. But when we do, we'll be able to watch in our households, pay for like being at a movie, but watch in our households. So yeah, the classical SABC is going and is going to go. I see a lot of digital satellites, decoders or satellites on people's houses all over the place, from townships to rural areas to whatever. And I can tell you that if you go back 20 years, that didn't exist. As a matter of fact, Mnet was so exclusive. You firstly couldn't afford it. And secondly, you used to have what they used to call open time, which only people could watch every once in a while. But in 15, 20 years, the transformation is almost to the point where multi-choice is, in trouble. And you'd have never thought them to be in trouble 15 years ago. They had the monopoly. There was no other pay channel TV like, multi-choice. But now they're in trouble because of, as Dumisa says, streaming. So it'll be there, but it won't be the same. It won't be the same.
Yeah, no, definitely.
It's great to see Matsiriso. Hi, Matsiriso. I think there's a first time.
Hello. Can I ask a question to Dumisa? How would you improve essay content, like compared to your Netflix is fire, okay, from what I've seen so far. So how would you improve essay content based on like the quality? Not like, okay, videos, okay, like I don't think like the quality of the videos is bad, but like content wise, like how would you base it on an African based content, like directed to people and tell African stories to be specific?
Yeah.
How would you like address that?
I think we need to start. I think a potential issue that we're going to run into is the fact that as DSTV sort of disappears, you're going to have Netflix and Amazon Primes and all these foreign companies that are going to be funding all our production here and then obviously making all of the profit off of it. And I think that it's important for us to actually find a sort of platform of our own in which we can use to actually elevate African content globally. And in that way, we don't get cut out in terms of the financial benefits or profits off of it, while simultaneously engaging with the rest of the world in this space. I think we have a good sort of standard when it comes to actually shooting and like making the content. And I think we just haven't actually had sort of financial or corporate backing towards boosting that content out globally, unless it's provided to us by Disney trying to make a African movie in a place that doesn't exist. But yeah.
But Mahlatsi said Showmax has great potential, and I fully agree with that. They've put out some good-ish content. I think production companies like The Bar Leader are really getting into that market of creating some good content. They just need to scale, like I said, and put that go beyond South Africa into the African continent and potentially even overseas. So but they have great potential. I think we as Africans, as South Africans as well, need to start supporting this content and start watching it, because then your Showmaxes, your Netflix won't buy into the content if you're not watching it.
Yeah, that's true. But then also, because with multi-choice, they need to put in the financial backing towards it. Because with Netflix, it's like there's so much content coming out all the time. You have to be able to compete with that in some way, or else then people are just going to choose Netflix. So then it's also like we want to proudly South African, support other proudly South African businesses. But at the same time, those businesses need to make sure that they're competing on like the same level and everything.
Yeah. Well, I think, before we close, I want to go back to JD Creations. Matsiriso actually did ask what is JD's value proposition. Who is your actual target market as a company?
Okay. Well, our target market at the moment primarily is marketing companies and SMEs. And the value we try to provide them is that high quality content at a low cost. And so we oftentimes find ourselves collaborating with marketing companies where they'll come to us with like a concept or a script or like a video that they want done. And then most of the time we get to engage with the script and then create the sort of direction behind it. And then other times particularly when we're working with businesses, is that we help strategize content for them to make that aids them in building their business and achieving whatever goals that they might have.
Okay. All right, that's cool. Anything else from anybody? Last chance, going once, twice.
Question. You're talking about digital content, so I wanted to ask, what are the ways that you recommend, to monetize it?
There's a couple ways you can do it. I mean, you could freelance, you could develop an audience and then start influencing. You could just start a business like I've done. You can work at a different place, like a company such as ours, but we're not currently looking for jobs because we can barely afford to sustain ourselves at the moment. But then, there's a couple of different ways that you can go about it. I think it predominantly depends on what it is that you see yourself doing when it comes to your content. So how do you picture your overall content creator self? And then what's the best path to achieving that?
Okay, thanks.
I have a question.
Yes.
So I wanted to ask, sorry, for a person as myself, because a career I want to step into, I would love to be a screenwriter. So what kind of like advice would you give me as an individual? What kind of advice would you give? Because I mean, like someone mentioned earlier, how they mentioned that the content in which Americans are creating with their shows and their movies and stuff like that, how would like one, such as myself, not make it the same level? Like I don't want to create like shows that are similar to this. I want to create something that's more African. So like how can I achieve that? I don't know if my question makes sense.
I think like telling African stories is simply the best way to go. So for example, last year I had the fortunate opportunity of assisting on a set. It's an American film crew that was in New York University. The director and writer of it, her name is Talia. She's a South African white girl. And she got the opportunity to go and study overseas. And basically her and her crew for third year came to South Africa because they have such a lovely budget. And they shot their short film, their final year short film here. And so I was the assistant to the cinematographer where I helped him with like pulling focus and lighting and things. And that project ultimately is about her and her relationship with her helper, who she calls Umama, because it's about how essentially she spent, while her parents were away, a lot of her time being raised by her helper. And so that story, as of this year, which got released last year, as of this year got nominated for a Student Academy Award and is potentially going to get nominated for an actual Academy Award by the end of this year, which would be crazy news. And so that's just based on a story that a lot of South Africans have and relate to. And so I think there's lots of room for South African stories. I think people overseas love them a lot. And I think we just need to find the ways of telling those stories the best. Because I love like screenwriting. It's my favorite thing. And like, I love telling stories. That's like my number one thing. So I'm also like trying to be a screenwriter. But I also advise that you sort of extend beyond just screenwriting and you don't just focus on like telling stories, but then you see how it is that you can use your creativity to provide value in the community around you, because that's ultimately how you need to sort of sustain yourself financially. And then see how you can incorporate it still into things that you love and things that you want to do, but don't be afraid to expand yourself, you know.
Can I just add to that quickly? Dumisa, you're absolutely right. I think sometimes we overcomplicate the storytelling around filming and how you do it. So I think the most complicated bit is integrating it and editing it, etc. But the storytelling should be as simplistic as ever. So I don't know if any of you I didn't see the movie, but I saw the trailer. I don't know if any of you have ever seen a movie that was done 100% over Zoom. It's actually a Zoom movie. It was done during lockdown and isolation. It's an American movie, and the way it's done is brilliant. What the guys are actually doing is running around with their own phones, talking to each other FaceTime, but actually behind it is the scene and a story. That's very interesting. And what I took away from that is, like everything else, a lot of things are just complicated. So to answer your question, how do you do it? You literally pick up your phone and you start and you record. And then from there, you bring in the Dumisas of the world who've got the ability to either look at what it is that you've recorded or want to do or how you want to do it. And we'll come up with more, what I would call innovative ways, sometimes sophisticated ways, but not necessarily complicated ways. Because I know sometimes when you see movies being shot, or you get all these cameras and all this sort of, these phones that you have today, some of the new phones that you have today, he'll tell you, their quality picture, you would not know the difference. Whether it was one of these cinematographer kind of cameras or whatever. So start, just think about what it is you want to record and start it. And to Dumisa's point, just as simple as a story about your helper, your nanny, or your simple story about your friend, or just tell stories. Just if that's your creative edge, just do it. put a lot of it, put 2 hours, 3 hours together, give it to Dumisa. He'll edit it and put it into something quite interesting, and then out it goes. And the more you do of those, the better they'll become, and the more you'll get the kind of direction of how you want to do it. But don't wait to get the equipment and the this and the that and the, because then it'll never happen.
Yeah, exactly. You can, like, I've seen, like, even some major, like, directors and actually even major commercials and things have been shot on a phone to prove that you don't need, like, these crazy pieces of equipment anymore. So yeah, like, you can just start today.
Absolutely. No, that was great. Thank you so much, Dumisa. And just to close off, or give you your last talking points. I like what you said on your bio again on LinkedIn, and your last question is, what value does your content provide to your audience? And we're speaking now that just pick up your phone. And I think the thing that you have to think about is, one, what are you passionate about? What is it that you love doing? And then what is that content? What is the purpose of that content? And what are you providing to your audience? And that will also then, guide you in terms of what type of content you should be creating in the first place. Dumisa, do you have anything to say before we close off?
Yeah, I think the start today point is a really good one to end on. I think just, like, take an idea in your head and just go for it, and don't let anyone stop you, and then learn from it as well.
Yep. Well, thank you. Thank you for joining us and for gracing us with your presence. And that is it from our side, guys. We shall see you tomorrow, actually. Please do join us for the social media and personal branding overview, hosted by me, of course. But yeah, see you on the flip side.
Thanks, everybody. Take it easy. Ciao, ciao.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.